I work as a waitress at a restaurant. It's normal for me to get a few creeps being creepy toward me. I have rather large you-know-what, and my design to be loose work shirt is still tight across the chest, so it's very obvious, and I'm pretty much used to the attention. And all of the cat calls and such are just part of the background noise to me at this point. But last week, there was this guy who I was serving. Probably mid-20s, somewhat good-looking. Probably used to getting girls with little or no effort. Anyways, he told me that he would be leaving the best tip of my life. I got excited because I was thinking he was going to leave like 50 or $100 or something. Hey, I got bills to pay, you know? But instead of leaving a cash tip, he left his phone number and a note to call him for the best night of my life. Obviously, I was disappointed to have been stiff, but I threw away the note and forgot about the whole thing. Until yesterday. He came in again and sat in my section. When I went to take his order, he asked if I'd gotten his note. I lied and said that the busser must have thrown it away. He saw past my lie and told me that I should really be ashamed of myself for disrespecting him like that. I told him that I have a fiance, but I may as well have told him that I have a pet rock, because he said, "I'm getting that date with you." I asked one of my coworkers if he'd take the table instead, and he understood and took it. But that wasn't the end of it. I take the bus home, and that customer just happened to be taking the same bus. This made me uncomfortable, and I texted my fiance, and he met me at the bus stop. Sure enough, the creep got off at my stop. He tried acting like he and I were friends, but my fiance put his arm around me and politely asked him to leave. The creep said, "You think you can be a real man to her?" He was obviously trying to challenge my fiance, but luckily he's smarter than that and just said, "Leave her alone. Have a good day," before turning us around and walking to our apartment. That was yesterday evening, and luckily nothing happened today. But my manager said that if he gives me any more trouble, to let her know and she'll deal with it. Of all the creeps I've come across in all my years of being a waitress, this is the first time I've been truly uncomfortable. Hopefully last night's encounter was the end of it though. Edit. I'm looking through my posts, and I see that this was posted 5 months ago, just before it was archived and unable to be edited or commented on for some reason. Never understood why Reddit does that. So I thought I would add a quick update. A couple weeks after I posted this, he came in on one of my days off and specifically requested me to be his waitress. My manager recognized him and told him that he had to leave. When he asked why, she said that it was for making her employees uncomfortable. I am told that he got angry and ran his arm across the hostess podium as he left, knocking off the menus and crayons. My manager called the police. We decided to not press charges, but we did tell them about what happened, and I got a restraining order. And now he's banned from the restaurant. I haven't seen or heard from him since. The thing that makes me feel better, aside from the restraining order and banning, is that I don't think he was stalking me. If he had, he would have known that I wasn't working that day. But either way, I'm glad that's over. Definitely the scariest encounter with a customer I've ever experienced. This one's not as creepy as some other stories on here, but it's a creepy story nonetheless. When I was about 15, I went on a school trip to a neighboring country. We were staying in quite a nice hotel with a 7-Eleven less than a half-mile's walk away. My school is pretty loose, so the teachers allowed us to walk to the 7-Eleven whenever, just as long as we had another person with us. One night at about 9 p.m., my friends and I decided to go get some food. Side note, we are both girls. As we were walking there, a gold car, very recognizable, slowed down next to us. The windows rolled down to reveal 4 men, all about in their mid-20s, in army uniforms. They started catcalling and wolf whistling and making us feel uncomfortable in general. We scoffed and kept walking, hoping they'd leave us alone. Eventually, they drove off, but about 30 seconds later they drove past us again, clearly having made a U-turn at the end of the road. This time their calls were a lot more creepy, saying that we were their type and that it was going to be a fun night. My friends and I were only half a block from a 7-Eleven, so we ran inside, looking understandably panicked. We started browsing the store, but were too freaked out to buy anything. We were just about to leave when we noticed headlights passing the store windows. We turned to the front door and saw the gold car slowly doing circles around the car park. My friend and I really started freaking out, at which point the clerk in the store noticed. He asked us if we were okay, and we explained the situation to him. He said he'd handled it and went outside. We saw him lean into the car, and he said he would handle it and went outside. We saw him lean into the gold car and make some hand motions as if telling them to go away. The gold car drove off, and we breathed a sigh of relief. We thanked the clerk and bought some food. Just as we were about to leave again, the clerk made a weird face at the door. "Hang on a second," he said. The clerk walked out of the store far enough to just see around the corner. He came back in very calmly and asked us to follow him to the back of the store. "Girls, I don't want to frighten you, but the car is parked around the corner, and only the driver is in it." My friend and I asked what we should do, if we should call the police or something. But the clerk said that because the men were wearing military clothing, it was unlikely the police would be on our side. He said several girls in the city had gone missing in similar circumstances, and nothing was ever done. The clerk told us his car was parked around the back of the shop, and if we were quick, we could get in and drive off without being seen by the gold car. Immediately, I was skeptical about getting into a car with a stranger, but it was our only shot. We ran to the car, jumped in, and the clerk, thankfully, dropped us safely at the hotel. We told the teachers what had happened, and after that, a rule was created that if you were leaving the hotel, it was in groups of 3 with at least one boy. We went back a few times afterwards to thank the clerk again, but only during the day. This happened to me during the summer between middle school and high school. My drug-addicted older brother Jason had just moved out of my mom's garage. They'd had a falling out over something, and it was a relief when he was gone. Not long after that, I moved into the garage in his place. I'd only been living in there less than a week when it happened. I was chilling on some good old-fashioned MMO gaming with a group of friends when I excused myself to go to the bathroom. Since the door to the garage was separate from the house, I stepped onto the porch and went over to the back slider. There was a sticky note on it that informed me my family had gone to the store and would be back soon. This immediately made me nervous, as I would have preferred to have been told, but I brushed it off and went inside. Our 2 large dogs, Bella and Sadie, harmless but intimidating, were sleeping behind the baby gate, separated into my mom's bedroom and what was once mine but is now in the process of being made into a playroom for my 3-year-old niece, Kate. There wasn't really much furniture in it, other than some toys and 2 plush chairs, so the door was closed to discourage the dogs from going in there. They weren't destructive and were allowed to roam as they wanted for the most part, but one of them, Bella, had a habit of eating whatever she could find. So when we weren't home, they were usually crated or kept out of places that they could find things to eat, aka the kitchen. The bathroom door was just before the gate, so I said hello and went in. I closed the door, locked it, did my business, washed my hands. After that, since I was there, I grabbed a hold of my hairbrush. Then I heard something. I thought I was crazy at first. Sometimes I wonder if I still am. The latchable door to the baby gate clicked open, which isn't something any of our animals were capable of doing. I heard movement before the distinct sound of dog collars passing by the door. Bella and her sister, Sadie, didn't bark or growl. They just rushed by, straight toward the kitchen. I was paralyzed with fear and I didn't dare move. I held my breath with a hand over my mouth, extremely worried. Our dogs were lovable, but if this had been a stranger, they could have been barking. Whoever had left them out of their gate knew them. I tried to tell myself that maybe it was my family, but considering they'd all gone, and they weren't exactly the type of people to come home quietly, I knew that was a mistake. It got worse from there, and I will never forget the sound of the bedroom door that was mine less than a week ago creaking open slowly. There was a long pause, and I heard either Bella or Sadie come close to the gate again briefly before she went back toward the kitchen. What felt like a long time passed in complete, deafening silence, only to be stopped suddenly by an echo of the baby gate clicking shut. It seemed like hours until I could hear the back door slide open and close, followed by more silence. I didn't move. What was I supposed to do? There was no telling if whoever was in there had actually left or not. And at the time, it wasn't exactly common for people to have cell phones, especially kids my age, so I had no way of contacting my family or even calling the police. Eventually, I worked up the nerve and pushed the door open. Almost immediately, Bella and Sadie ran up to me for attention before wandering off again, seeming unfazed, but still on the opposite side of the gate that they'd been on before I'd entered the bathroom. The door to Kate's new playroom was open just a bit, enough for someone to peer inside, despite having been closed before that. I convinced myself that it was all in my head, but hid in the bathroom until I heard my family come home. After explaining what happened, the police were called and canvassed the area but found nothing. Our home backed up to a park that was notorious for suspicious night activity, so anyone could have hopped the fence easily. My mom had a theory that it was probably Jason trying to break in to steal money for more drugs. I didn't argue with that, but I didn't agree with her. If it had been Jason, it would have been even more unnerving that the person in question had only looked in the room that was once mine and hadn't seemed to be shifting around, looking for money. I was a teenager. I didn't exactly have money in there. Deep down, I was terrified it was one of Jason's many creepy old drug addict friends that he always brought by. They were always really unnerving and stared at me in ways that made me very uncomfortable. I was scared that when they were stalking the house before they saw my family leave without me, and since they wouldn't have known I was in the garage, and I'd taken down that we're going to the store note, it probably looked as if I was home alone and in my room. I hate to think what would have happened had I been. I don't even know if this really happened or if I was overreacting, but to the person who walked into my place and was comfortable enough that my dogs didn't react, let's not meet again. This happened when I was a junior in high school. I was 16 years old when I was invited to one of my friend's birthday parties. A lot of really scary things happened to me in this period of my life in this area, but this is one of the scarier events. I lived pretty close to my school in a nearby apartment complex, and then in the middle of a big city, so most of the time I just biked the 5 to 7 minutes to school. The party wasn't until 4:30, so the plan for me was to bike back home to change, drop off my bike, walk to the diner next to the complex, and wait until I could get picked up there. I get home to change clothes and grab a bag to bring my ukulele and other essentials with me. My ukulele didn't fit in my bag, so I zipped it up on both sides so the top was visible. I grabbed my keys and I'm off. Now, to get an idea of how the parking lot was set up, the entire complex had a gate with a short wall and a metal fence around the top of it. The cars were all lined around the gate, and across it were the 30 to 40 apartment buildings in between. I happen to live right on the corner of the car gate, but to avoid the public, I usually walk inside the gate until I get to the other end, where there's a small gate door that looks locked but never is. I was walking down the sidewalk, passing the apartments, when I saw two men across from me on the street. One of them turned and looked directly at me. I initially thought something was off, but I didn't really think much of it, and simply avoided them since I was close to the gate door anyway. After a bit, he started to walk slightly adjacent to me and next to the cars. He looked to be at least in his mid-40s. He had dark hair and tan skin that didn't seem like he took good care of. He suddenly asked me, "What kind of instrument is that?" referring to the ukulele in my backpack. Now, I dumbly responded with briefly, "Ukulele," and I ignored him since I was still very young and it was just my first reaction. I immediately regretted it since he started to pace up just a little more and started to ask, "What's your name?" At this point, I get a sinking feeling. I knew that I needed to get out of there. My fight or flight kicked in and started to quicken my pace. As expected, he started to do the same, but his friendly tone switched quickly, and he started repeating himself but more aggressively. I started to run at this point, and he did the same. Thankfully, there happened to be another younger man at the end of the gate who saw me sprinting to the gate. I started to wave towards the man asking for help, while panting from the sprinting and sheer adrenaline shooting through my body. He quickly noticed everything happening, opened the gate for me to be let through, and proceeded to block the way for the man previously chasing me. I sprinted all the way to the diner, telling them how I was chased and asking them to sit in a seat away from the windows. The team was very polite and helpful overall. They brought me water and allowed me to wait until my friend arrived. I can't imagine what would have happened in an alternative situation. I wish I could thank the man that helped me. I don't know if I would have been fast enough if it wasn't for him. Now I refuse to walk anywhere by myself and only bike or drive if I need to. This story happened about 2 years ago when I was 19, and my foster sister Kira was 16. In case anyone checks out my profile and sees that I refer to myself as a guy, but in this story I call myself a girl, I'm a trans guy. When this story took place, I was more femininely presenting than I am today. It was the summer before I was going to college. I mostly lived with my mom and Kira except for every other weekend where I'd stay with my dad. Now, summers where I am can get really hot and humid, so we had a habit of waiting to walk the dogs until 6 or 7 p.m. because that's when it would be colder but still light outside. On this particular evening, Mom wasn't going to be home until late, though I don't remember the exact reason why. She's a woman that likes to stay busy and often participates in choirs, Bible studies, youth group events, classes, and more. So it wasn't uncommon for Kira and I to be left home alone until about 8 or 9 p.m. So it was up to me and Kira to walk the dogs by ourselves, unless we wanted our younger dog Samson to throw tantrums due to pent-up energy, even though we lived in the countryside and could have walked them down our street. Kira and I decided to drive out 20 minutes to a park instead. Why? I don't remember. It could have been anything from being bored walking our roads to not wanting to have to deal with blind curves and hills. Whatever the reason, at around 7:30 p.m., Kira and I harnessed our 2 dogs, packed them up in the car, and drove to the park. Let me quickly explain the layout of the park so that it's easier to understand why we got nervous halfway through our walk. This park isn't very big, but it's popular because of its loop. The entire park is surrounded by a mile-long looping road with its attractions, like playgrounds, ponds, and a small country hall, spaced about on the inner side of the loop. The outer side is just grass, trees, and one playground at its end. Thus, it's common and expected to pass people walking the loop at least 2 times if you're walking in opposite directions, but not if you're walking in the same direction, obviously. Any cars on this road can only drive in one direction because it's a one-way road. At first, everything about this walk was normal. I parked the car, we clipped our dogs to the leashes, and we started on the loop. Every so often, we would stop so I could take pictures of our good boys, particularly of Kira trying to wrangle Samson, who pulls like his life depends on it and weaves around because he wants to smell everything. It was while I was taking one of these pictures that the first encounter happened. A man who looked to be in his 40s walked past us, walking the same direction we were, up towards the playground on the outer side of the loop. He smiled at Kira, nodded, said hello, or cute dogs or something like that, and kept walking. I honestly didn't think anything of it. We are at a park at a time of day where it's common to walk around due to the cooler temperature, and people where I am are generally friendly. Smiling and saying hi is pretty normal, no matter who says it. We smiled back and maybe said hi or thanks, depending on what he said, and that was that. Or so we thought. This man passed us again only like 10 minutes later, directly across from where we'd seen him previously. Just like he did before, he smiled and said hi. This time, Kira and I looked at each other once. He was ahead of us and shared a, well, that was weird expression. Just 10 minutes earlier, he had passed us walking up towards the playground and subsequently broke off from the loop, and he'd been walking in the same direction as us. This time, though, he'd cut in front of us, and he did it in a way where we had to stop to avoid running into him. He nearly touched Kira with how close he was walking. That was already weird in itself. The other weird part was him cutting past us in the opposite direction. The only way he could have done that was if he'd cut across the inside of the loop, since it would have been close to impossible to pass us at our certain point from the other direction, if he decided to walk the opposite way of the loop from us. It came off almost like he wanted to walk by us again. But just like before, Kira and I brushed this weirdness off. The guy could have been enjoying a rambling stroll and doing his own thing for all we knew. Besides, we had 2 reasonably sized dogs with us. Who would want to mess with us? Not even 5 minutes later, this same man passed us again. Once again cutting so close past us that he nearly brushed shoulders with Kira. Again, he smiled and said, "Hi," before walking off. This was officially the moment I decided that we needed to leave. Sure, it's normal to pass a person at least a few times walking this loop if you're going in opposite directions, but doing so takes a while. You have to at least get to the parallel spot on the loop from where your paths first intersected to see each other again. Neither the time between running into the guy nor the location we passed each other matched up in a way that didn't look suspicious. Plus, I really wasn't a fan of how he cut across us. The first time he passed us like a normal person walking faster than us would, albeit a little close. The second time he cut in front of us from the opposite direction instead of walking around us, to the point that we had to stop to avoid running into him. This third time, he walked up behind us, then did this weird directionally slanted walk to cross the street and go in the opposite direction, cutting us off again. So yeah, I told Kira to hustle so we could get to our car and get out instead of doing a second loop. So that's what we did. When we were almost to our car, we noticed a car creeping along behind us. We pulled to the side and stopped to let it pass, but for a second it stopped too. We figured he was getting ready to park, so we started walking again. The car started creeping along behind us soon after we did, so we stopped again and the car stopped with us. This was when Kira got nervous. We hadn't seen the middle-aged guy since the third cutoff, so we figured I had overthought the whole thing. But here we were, with this tinted windowed car acting very weird. Was it the same guy back with his car? A different one? We couldn't tell. Before anything could happen though, another car idled up to the one next to us and whoever it was sped up to the expected 5 miles per hour. We got to our car pretty fast after that and practically picked up the dogs to get them inside of it. We got in and got out of there. My mistake, however, was neglecting my rear view mirror and the well-advised rule not to drive straight home if you're worried a stranger's taken too much interest in you. I was anxious, dumb, and primarily concerned with getting home where we could be safe. Because home is safe, right? Nothing bad is supposed to happen to you there, right? Ah, my naive false sense of security. I think we got home around 8 something. The sun had finally disappeared behind the horizon, but it wasn't fully dark yet. Just that dusty purple color the sky gets before it finally accepts that it's nighttime. Mom wasn't home yet, so we got the dog some water, locked the doors, ate a late dinner, and chilled in the living room, talking about things that didn't really matter. It was almost 9:30 when the scariest part of this whole ordeal happened. There, Kira and I were sitting on different couches, talking about something or other, when we noticed the ceiling briefly light up over where Kira was sitting. An important note here is that Kira was sitting on a small couch with her back to a window that faces the front of the house, while I was on a couch on the opposite wall where I could see a sliver of the front porch. Likewise, right next to Kira was our front door, which has 3 small rectangular windows on it. Due to our long, slightly curvy driveway, it's common to see headlights stream through that window, light up the ceiling, fade, then intensify. It means someone's just come home. So when the ceiling above Kira lit up, we thought nothing of it, assuming Mom was finally coming back from wherever she went that night, and we didn't take any notice of the light skipping the final arc of someone pulling all the way up the driveway. We also didn't pay any mind to how long it was taking Mom to come inside. Mom has a habit of pulling in, then checking her phone for who knows how long before coming inside. After a couple of minutes, I noticed the small motion sensor light Mom set up on a table on the porch light up. Again, I could only see a sliver of space based on my position and the curtains. Basically, I could see a smidge of the table and the rails bordering her porch, but not its stairs or anything approaching the door depending on how they approached it. I wasn't paying much attention either because I assumed it was my mom. Right after the light went off, We both heard the storm door open, but we didn't hear anyone pressing the code keys of our lock or jiggling the door handle, like Mom usually does right away. The moment the storm door creaked open, our two dogs jumped up and ran to the door, barking like mad. Our golden/greyhound mix, Calvin, has a deep, scary bark which contradicts his adorable appearance. Samson, our dumb goofball son who is incapable of hurting a fly, but a big boy jumps on his hind legs and scrapples to find purchase on one of the small windows in a desperate attempt to see who's outside. Immediately, the storm door slammed shut, and we heard heavy footsteps on the cement of our porch. Calvin started going nuts and jumped up on Kira's couch, standing on his back instead of the cushions to look out the window. Samson ran out of the room and went out the doggy door that leads to the back porch, which has a ramp going down into a fenced-off portion of our yard. I couldn't move. I'd never understood really what it meant when people described their limbs turning to lead until that moment. It felt like I didn't have limbs really, like moving wasn't an option. If I moved, I might glimpse something or someone through the windows. The person could see me running around the house, freaking out, and decide to come after us after all. So I sat there, my mind steadily going blank as my heart sped up and limbs refused to move. In the game of fight, flight, or freeze, I am the freezer. Kira, on the other hand, is a fighter. She spins around and looks out the window but can't see anything because, besides the motion light on the porch, it's too dark. So naturally, she gets up, grabs a stray dog toy, which just so happens to be a tug-of-war rope with the ball on one end, and opens the door. I tell her very calmly to shut the door and stay inside. She ignored me and stepped out onto the porch. She comes back inside after not seeing anything. But to my utter disbelief, she disappears to the kitchen, comes back with a knife, and goes outside again. This time, she's gone for a handful of seconds before running back inside and slamming the door shut. Breathless, she tells me she went out a bit into the yard and saw the outline of a man by the run-down dog kennel we don't use anymore. When she saw him and froze, he moved. This time, she listened to me when I told her to lock the door. I managed to call my mom, despite my head being empty and my limbs being lead, and she convinced me to get up, make sure all of the doors were locked, including the basement, and make sure the dogs are inside. I ended up making Kira go into the fenced-up section to grab Samson back inside because I couldn't get my legs to move after thinking about doing it myself. Cowardly, I know. After Mom got home and looked around finding nothing, we called the non-emergency number for the police, not wanting to bother them in case we were overreacting. 2 cops came by and walked around our yard and found nothing. We got the sense they didn't believe us, but instead saw us as 2 overexcited girls with exaggerated imaginations. Still, they humored us and told us, after we told them about the park, that if we think anyone might be following us or if someone's acting a little too creepy, not to drive straight home and to check if anyone's following us. Then they left. To this day, I'm pretty sure the only people who believe someone with malicious intent came to our home in hopes of finding 2 teenage girls are Kira and me. Though whether or not whoever it was the guy from the park, we're not sure. But it's too coincidental, isn't it? That the day we have multiple encounters with this guy, who goes out of his way to get close to us and a car inching along behind us, we also have an almost intruder encounter. Plus, there were too many details that didn't add up to us having overly excited imaginations. We both saw headlights. The motion detector on the porch turned on, and the storm door opened and stayed open until Samson jumped up to look out the door's window. It's a very noisy door and makes sounds when opening and closing. We heard footsteps. Kira saw someone, and the dogs don't run up to the door like that and bark their heads off if no one's there. I don't know if whoever was at her house was the same guy that ran into us at the park. If it was, I don't know if the reason he cut in front of us as close as he did was to test how our dogs would react to him, and them not caring at all, or the first time, wagging their tails convinced him that they weren't a threat. I don't know if he was in the car that inched behind us and stopped when we stopped. I don't know what would have happened if Calvin didn't have a scary, manic bark, or if Samson wasn't tall enough to look out the high windows on the door. Don't know much of anything. But what I do know is this: if you are out and about, minding your own business, and a stranger is talking a lot, and a stranger is taking a lot of notice to you, following you, frequently running into you, or whatever, trust your gut. Don't drive or walk straight home. Meander, get to a public space, or just take your time. Pay attention to your surroundings. You never know who's watching you. I attended a small liberal arts university with a student population of about 3,600. However, during the summer, this population obviously goes down considerably, and the campus is mostly empty. You'll occasionally see someone who works there, or a student working there during the summer, but for the most part, it's pretty deserted. The summer between my junior and senior years, I worked on campus for the team that hosts and runs any conferences and events that take place. The school will rent out dorms and event space for groups, and students are in charge of cleaning, organizing, and managing these groups for their day. A sort of hospitality team. As part of this, we would have someone at the front desks of the main university building and any dorms that were occupied from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. to field any questions or to otherwise help as needed. We each were required to work a certain number of shifts each week, and one of the shifts I signed up for was from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the main university building. Absolutely nothing happened that night. I spent the evening catching up on The Daily Show. Rough job, I know. Nobody came by the center. Nobody called. We were trusted with the keys to the building, and whoever had the last shift of the evening had to lock up. As I stood outside locking the door, I heard someone ask behind me, "What time is it?" Having locked the door, I turned around and looked at my cell phone. Replied, "It's 11:01. Although the guy was around my age, I knew he wasn't a student. It was a small enough school where even if you didn't know everyone, you generally recognized faces, and you definitely knew the handful of students working there over the summer. I started to walk across campus to the dorm where they housed all the summer student workers, but I only got about 10 feet before I knew something was wrong. I stopped and turned around and saw the guy following behind me stop. I figured he could just be heading the same way, so I continued walking, and we played this weird game of red light, green light about twice more, for another 50 feet or so. It was at that moment I realized that this was very, very wrong, and he was directly following me. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, hoping maybe he was just lost. "I'm locked out of my place tonight," he replied. Not sure what to respond to that. I just said, "I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you can get back in." Note: if this isn't a classic case of girls being conditioned to be polite and non-aggressive, even in a case where they shouldn't be expected to be, then I don't know what is. I had no idea what to do, so I just continued walking. My mind was racing. I turned to look at him a few times and even directly stopped and looked at him once to let him know that I saw him. I was onto him. I felt so foolish. I didn't know whether to scream or run or call somebody on my phone. These all looking back would have been a much better option than just continuing to walk towards my residence with him following me. But it's like my brain wasn't working. I was panicking, I didn't have a purse or anything on me, so I knew he was looking to rob me. Thankfully, I passed by a dorm that had occupants in it, and my friend Mike, who was manning the front desk there that night, had decided to step out and smoke a cigarette. I had never been so glad to see somebody smoking a cancer stick. I yelled, "Mike, hi," and started towards him. He looked over, saw me, saw the guy following me, and somehow immediately knew something was wrong. I don't know whether it was the panic on my face or the fact that the guy was acting so shady, but I am so glad he recognized it. I didn't even have to say anything. He just looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm done here. Let's head back together." Of course, as soon as he saw Mike, my follower peeled off. I told Mike what happened, and as we walked back, we kept an eye out for him, but he was nowhere to be found. I thought that was the end of it. However, as we walked across the campus, we saw another summer worker, Julie, walking really fast looking behind her. Sure enough, there was Creeper McCreeperson. He had moved on quickly. "Julie," we yelled. As soon as she saw us, her face crumpled into the most relieved look I'd ever seen. Creeper ran away and we all walked back to the dorm together. As soon as we were inside, we were completely freaking out and getting our phones out to call the campus police when we heard the door to the dorm violently jiggling. Luckily, you needed an access card to get inside, but whoever was out there, one guess, was trying awfully hard to get in. Campus police never found him. I'm thankful for Mike's nicotine addiction. I didn't take any more late night shifts, and I continued to watch The Daily Show. This happened many years ago. I was about 10 or 11 and am now a 22-year-old. I lived in a pretty safe area, and I, along with many other children from school, would walk home. I was tasked with ensuring my siblings and mother's now ex-boyfriend's son all got home safe. It was a warm day in early spring, and my middle sister was a few feet back with a bunch of kindergartners. I was with a friend, her sister, my youngest sister, and the little boy I walked home. As we walked, my friend and her sister began to fight, and both ended up a few feet up the street. It was while I watched them fighting that I heard my middle sister shout. I said no. I glanced back to see a white pickup truck keeping stride, and I immediately positioned my body between the two kids with me. The truck started to drive down the road but stopped at me, and I glanced up, and all I remember was acne and red hair on the driver. "Hey, it's kinda chilly. Want to ride home?" he said. "No thank you," I responded, knowing full well it was not chilly. He followed along beside us. He and his friend continued pressuring us while I shielded my sister and almost stepbrother from them. Finally, they gave up and sped forward suddenly just to stop at my friend. Luckily, at that moment, a car started to turn the corner towards us. These guys were on the wrong side of the road and left in a hurry. The person in the car was my friend's mom on her way for a meeting with a teacher, and we all ran to her crying. She instructed me to get the kindergartners home and call the cops. I walked every single child home, and then my siblings and I booked it the next 2 blocks to my would-be stepbrother's house. We told his mom, and she tried calling my mom to get us. Due to no answer, she just stood outside and watched us walk home to make sure we got there. We lived a block away. Once I was home, I lost it. My mom also called the cops upon hearing the story, and my youngest sister, who didn't understand any of this stuff, said, "Mom, they wanted Sarah. They kept staring at those." She pointed at my body. I later learned that they had been seen scouting around the school, and luckily, because of their obvious vehicle, to this day I remember, tiny white pickup with skull stickers on the back window, they were found. I'm not sure what came of it all because my mom won't talk about it. However, it was one of the freakier things to happen to me. This happened about a year ago. It isn't much, but it scared me enough that I sometimes stay awake at night, think about what could have happened. My uncle was getting married, and since the venue was near our house, he and his family stayed with us. My step-cousin, Quinn, was about 10 years old, and she was full of boundless energy. One night after watching a movie, the entire family had fallen asleep, except for me and Quinn. Quinn was the furthest thing from tired, and she begged me to take her on a walk. It was 10 going on 11, and I was a little uneasy being out so late, despite being 17 and living in a fairly crime-free neighborhood. Quinn, however, has the superpower of pestering anyone into doing anything she wants. I finally give in and we head out. My uneasiness wears off after a while. We were walking by the road. Usually it's filled with traffic, but at the late hour it was very empty. It was nice being alone for a while. Quinn and I talked, and I learned a lot of things about my new family member. Suddenly, a car stops in front of the road from us. It's close enough that you could see into the car, but far enough that the passengers in the car couldn't touch you. As soon as the car stopped, we did too. The driver rolled down the passenger side window. The driver was a big, burly-looking man. I remember he looked like he had a scowl on his face. His passenger, a frail-looking red-headed woman, just stared forward and refused to look our way. The man asked us if there were any animal shelters near us because he wanted to give away the dog his 14-year-old daughter had found. I remember thinking it was odd that he specified his daughter was 14, and then I noticed the woman in the back seat who looked anything but 14. She looked closer to 30 in my opinion. She was also staring straight ahead and refusing to look at us. Initially, upon seeing the woman in his car, my guard went down, but I still didn't move forward. Upon hearing the word dog though, Quinn shot forward and I grabbed her by the back of the shirt. For some reason, I was remembering a true crime documentary where a serial killer and his girlfriend would lure young girls close to the car, and then they would shove them into the car and drive off. Anyways, this guy, I say asked, but he more like demanded that we directed him to an animal shelter. To his credit, we did live near one, but it had been closed for hours and it was about 10 minutes until midnight. I told him that, and then he insisted we come look at the dog. It was then I realized I could see no evidence of a dog at all. My alarm bells were going crazy and I desperately wanted to escape, but all I could do was stand still and respond. Quinn, however, was struggling against me. When Quinn was younger, her mom promised her a pet, but she never delivered. After this, Quinn did whatever she could to get her hands on an animal. She wanted to see that dog, and I think the man could tell because then he told us to come take the dog from him. I said we couldn't, and the man told me that it was free and the dog even had a collar. Then I told him to let the dog out and we could catch it. He refused and said it would run into the street and maybe get hurt. I was running out of excuses and I was wondering if I should just throw Quinn over my shoulder and hightail it back home. Then 2 cars come out of nowhere. The man sees them and his demeanor changes. Without looking at us, he says, "Never mind," and drives away. I grabbed Quinn's hand and basically dragged her back home. I think Quinn realized the danger of the situation when we got home because the next morning she told my uncle, my step-aunt, and my parents. My parents and uncle think I was being paranoid, but my step-aunt and siblings agree there was something off about the family in the car. Whatever their true intentions were, I don't know and I don't care. So this happened in 2011. So the exact dialogue may have escaped my memory a bit, but the situation is something I'll never forget. Also, AIM was still pretty active during this time, and so was video chatting. Think tiny chat. This is important for later. I was on an online dating site. I won't say which because I'll be dragged mercilessly in the comments. LOL. I was talking to this guy. I was 31 at the time and he was 28. We talked for about 6 weeks before I gave him my phone number and we took it offline to calling and texting for another couple of weeks. 2 months after our initial chat, we were texting and he told me that he was out having a few beers at a bar near my house. He asked what I was doing and asked if I wanted to come out, but I had had a very long day at work and didn't feel like going to a bar. I'm also not a big drinker. I invited him over to my place. I know. After he finished at the bar and he accepted. Figured I would be okay since I do keep firearms for protection and know how to defend myself if needed. I also had a webcam. I took a shower so I wouldn't smell like a water buffalo on a hot day. The air went out at work, put on some makeup and got dressed to wait. He then called and said he was outside of my house. I clicked record on my computer's webcam program and turned off my monitor and went to let him in. It was around 10 p.m. and he comes in. And we go back to my bedroom because my living room is being remodeled. We are sitting on the bed chatting for about an hour, talking about everything under the sun. The conversation flowed and he was very handsome and very easy to be comfortable with. We got onto the subject of firearms and I showed him mine. About 15 minutes later, he asked me for some water, so I go to the kitchen to get him a bottle. When I came back, he said he got a phone call and had to leave. After he left, I looked on my nightstand where I put the firearm down after showing him, and noticed that it was gone. I looked everywhere for it, thinking I'd put it down somewhere else. Nope, not there. I then played back the recording from my webcam program, and sure enough, it shows him grabbing it and putting it in his hoodie. I was terrified at that point. He knew where I lived, had my gun, and he left his phone on my bed. Right then, his phone rings and I answer it. Come to find out he's married. His wife was calling him wondering where he was. I told her everything, including the fact that he stole my gun and I had video evidence and was calling the police on him. Next thing I know, he's banging on my door. My gun is in his hand, asking me for his phone. The conversation went like this. Hey, I need my phone. Me, not opening the door but yelling through the window. Take the clip out of my gun, empty the chamber, throw the clip into the bushes, and put the one in the chamber across the road on the ground. No, give me my phone. I'm on the phone with your wife at the moment, and I have you on video stealing from me. I put his wife on speaker. Wife. A whole bunch of swearing words. Him. Shocked. He runs and gets in his car, then comes back. I threw it in the ditch, he said. At this point, I make him empty his pockets, take his pants off, take his hoodie off, and show me that he doesn't have my gun on him. All the while, his wife is on the phone. I go outside and get in his car, in the driver's seat, and tell him to take me to where he threw my gun. He proceeds to tell me that I don't know how hard it is for him. Being a felon, not being allowed to own a gun ever because of a mistake you made. The mistake? Domestic violence involving a gun. We get up the road and he tells me the car is there in the ditch. Then I realize the situation I'm in. I can get out of the car and go get it, leaving him to do whatever to me, if he chooses. He was 6'4" and 225 pounds. I was 5'3" and maybe 135 pounds at the time. Or I could make him go get it, taking a chance of him seriously hurting me. I took that chance since I was on his phone with his wife and my phone with 911. He retrieves my fanny pack, brings it to the car, and I drive back to my house and wait on the police. I get out of the car and he gets in the driver's seat. I'm still on the phone with the police and I walk around the back of his car to get his license plate number, and he just puts his car in reverse, hits me, and takes off. They found him later that evening. He still had the clip and the one in the chamber in his pocket. So, now he's enjoying time in prison, and I'm so glad I'll never have to meet this person again. My mom last saw her father and brother when she was a toddler and was reunited with them 40 years later. My newfound uncle lived with his girlfriend some 200 miles away from us, so we were making trips every other weekend or so to visit them. The girlfriend had kids from prior relationships. Many kids. At least 5. Probably more. Her eldest was in his early 30s and still lived with her. He was what would now be classified as a neckbeard, though this was well before the term. I was 11 or 12 at the time. I was a precocious child, so perhaps my behavior or tastes may have indicated something older, but my age wasn't kept a secret, and there were certainly adults in the vicinity at the time who knew exactly how old I was. I have vague memories of him, of having interesting conversations, of him seeming to appreciate my supposed maturity. I, a mere child, stopped in the living room and watched the Hudsucker Proxy with him, and understood it. So shocking, apparently. So it may sound like I'm leading up to him being a creep, but he actually remains, in my memory at least, a pretty good guy. So why is my story here? Well, his mom seemed to encourage our friendship a bit more than one would expect. She seemed to think that she was a matchmaker and would comment on how I was the perfect woman for her son, how he could settle down with me. What a cute couple that we made. Once again, I was 11 or 12 and he was in his early 30s. This was America in the 90s, if you were hoping for some cultural explanation. Anyways, the most I remember is us as a family going out to this big breakfast buffet, and the mom being creepily insistent that he drive me back to the house in his truck, ruling out any other passengers who may have needed a ride. She winked at him and suggested he show me the scenic route. So, he drove around for a while and pointed out random landmarks in an admittedly history-laden city. Then we went back to the house where his mom, nudge nudge, wink winked him the rest of the day. For unrelated reasons, my uncle broke up with her soon after, and we didn't have to go back. Before we get to this specific day, I would like to mention that some of these people are still out there, so for safety purposes, all names will be replaced. I will also not tell where I live, but it's somewhere in Europe. So first, a little background story. I was 22 at the time. My boyfriend and I had been clean for about 6 months. The life we had lived before was filled with hard drugs every day, And in a small town like ours, the circle of those kinds of people is small and everyone knows what everyone's sitting on and is up to. It's just one large group of people and it's like they're nesting together. Because of their constant proximity matched with the drugs, they eventually become so paranoid that they lose anything resembling trust towards one another. It becomes a never-ending season of weeding each other out, and people continuously disappear, found beaten to the brink of death, or are simply gotten rid of. Anyways, it was Easter, and we had spent the last half year in my in-laws' house, out in the woods. So, this weekend, we just had this strong urge to party a bit in the city. We called one of our old friends that we deemed trustworthy to ask if he could hook us up. His name was Vince. He started happy to help, as usual, and said he was sitting on some speed, and etc. He seemed eager to help out and invited us to come over and hang out, so we did. When we got there, there was just Vince and a girl that we only knew from a distance, Jane. Jane was known to be batshit crazy, and all the previous bump-ins I've had with her have left me with very, very bad vibes, knowing that she's been involved one way or another in the previous murders or disappearances taking place in the same circle of people. That is why I was happy to see that she was passed out on the sofa. Vince was happy to see us, after all. It had been a while. My boyfriend exchanged money for 4 pills of E, and to our delightful surprise, he gave us 4 more for free. So I and my boyfriend took 4 each, and while we waited for it to hit, Vince lit up a huge bowl of his homemade spice. For those of you who don't know what that is, as I believe it to be a European thing, it started off as synthetic weed but developed over the years, and its effects and side effects can be compared to heroin. Vince made his own and he made it strong. My boyfriend declined the offer, but I accepted after Vince himself had hit it. It instantly punched me in the brain, and it was not pleasant. It was like taking a hit of a nightmarish roller coaster. Felt sick and very disoriented, and all I could manage to utter was a mumbled, "I need to lie down." I made it to the sofa and collapsed, and all I could do was focus on not falling off the edge of earth. I don't know how long I laid like that, but when I finally could open my eyes, I quickly wished I hadn't. Jane was sitting on the edge of the sofa right beside me and just stared at me with crazy eyes, absent any concern. She started moving her head back and forth like a snake, and I am sure she purposefully tried to freak me out. "Are you okay?" she asked with a slow voice and the weirdest look on her face, looking as if hoping my answer would be no. I nodded and gathered all the strength I had left to make it to the bathroom where I threw up. When I was done feeling better, I went into the kitchen where Vince stated scoldingly, "Now you threw up on the E," and then asked if I wanted more. I declined, knowing by the familiar buzz that not all of the E had gone to waste. It was rather unusual for him to be concerned with my high, but at the time I didn't think anything of it. Vince instead insisted I take a line of Ethel, so I did. The 4 of us then decided to go outside and walked to a tiny peninsula connected with the city. People have always gone there so as not to be bothered by the cops or others, and it's a beautiful place. We sat there for a while, chilling and enjoying ourselves with what was invading our bloodstreams. This is where things take a turn. I was gradually becoming more and more screwed up and was kind of busy enjoying my buzz. While I was completely out of it, my boyfriend, who wasn't as far gone as I, felt things turning shady and grew more and more suspicious of Vince and Jane and their true intentions. He'd known Vince for many years and could tell something was up. Suddenly, Vince gave his phone to my boyfriend saying it's Ned. Both my boyfriend and I froze, exchanging glances. Now, Ned used to be very close to my boyfriend, going back at least 8 years, but 6 months back from this time, they had a falling out over who owed what, and my boyfriend had been rather vocal about his anger towards Ned, and he wasn't afraid to express his dislike for the guy to the people in the circle, making it clear that he wanted nothing to do with him, not realizing that the people had rallied to Ned's side because he was at the time the one who was sitting on the most drugs in town. After a few seconds of tension, my boyfriend took the phone. Hey man, what's up?" His jaw was clenched. "Yeah, I'm with Vince and Jane, where are you?" It was a short conversation, and I remember it to be a very strange one. My boyfriend sounded normal, while I could see he was anything but happy or relaxed. "Ned is coming here," he said, and looked at me. And even through my haze, I could see something was wrong. "Let's leave," I insisted. And as we got ready to get the heck out of there, a car pulled up to Vince and he looked over to us. "Meet up at my place?" We agreed and started walking the short journey back to the city. Jane, who'd come with us, said she needed to get to an ATM to take out some cash. We found one and Jane suddenly turned to my boyfriend. "You do it," she urged and handed him her card. Puzzled, he entered the given code and took out the amount of cash she asked for, giving her it and the receipt. Jane took a moment to examine the receipt, suspicion growing on her face. "This isn't right," she said, and glared accusingly at my boyfriend. We both gave her a look that said, "What the heck are you trying to pull?" I mean, the receipt and cash were there in her hand. Eventually, she gave up on trying to pin the theft on my boyfriend, and we all agreed to go back to Vince's apartment. In hindsight, I believe it was an attempt to add purpose to a crime that was about to take place. When we got there, the place was full of people, sitting on the sofas and the bed. They were older, all of them junkies or ex-convicts, and they were all acting very weird. They were silent and threw constant glances between each other, purposefully avoiding looking at my boyfriend. Yet, at the same time, it was very apparent that he was the target in the room. The entire atmosphere in the apartment had gone from seemingly friendly to hostile. My boyfriend, already tense and wary, overheard Vince muttering to one of the shady-looking guys that Ace and his people are coming. Now, Ace was basically a Nazi and had before tried to lure my boyfriend to remote places to take beatings or possibly to be taken care of, for the reasons of my boyfriend having expressed his liberal and anti-racist opinions in front of him. It should also be mentioned that at this point, Ace was also very close to Ned. My boyfriend instantly went up to me and urged that we should get the heck out of there. We both looked over to Vince, who was now sitting whispering with Jane. That is when we noticed Jane having a knife in her hand, which she tried to pass over to Vince, but he firmly shook his head and gestured by twice hitting a clenched fist into his palm, and his eyes met with my boyfriend's. My boyfriend grabbed me and pulled me out of the apartment, and we flew down the stairs. When we were hurrying back home, my boyfriend updated me on the signs I had obviously not noticed. Being as messed up as I was, I could hardly speak or think straight. In hindsight, I suspect that was part of their plan. He had been suspecting something was up since we left Vince's apartment the first time. I had only started to actually get the situation when we went up there the second time. I went into full panic. We hurried through town to get home, paranoid and in shock. Had we stayed minutes longer, I am certain they would have killed us. These people aren't the type to stop a beating when it's enough. I am writing this 2 years later, and I have since moved away to start a new life, but I wasn't surprised when I was told that 6 months ago, Vince was found dead and robbed. Many people think, me included, that Ace was behind it. Ned and Jane are now a couple, and I don't want to begin to think what kind of awful things they are doing to other people now as a team. If any of you doubt that some really bad things could have happened that day, let me inform you that Ace, just days ago, got convicted for arson and first-degree murder. His ex-girlfriend had just 1 day prior to the deed broken up with him, and so he brought 20 liters of gasoline and emptied it all in her apartment and set it on fire, locking her in to die in the flames. For me, it was a big shock to discover that Vince would betray us that severely. He'd been a really good friend and was a decent guy. I realize I sound naive, but when you're living that kind of life, those kinds of people are the only ones who understand and, frankly, want to do anything with you. I still have big issues with trusting people and often misread people as wanting to hurt me in some way. As I said, I have moved away from the town and am now living a clean life, but I still have dark thoughts. For example, I sincerely and wholeheartedly hope that Ace went in prison, can figure out how to use a sheet in more than one way, and until he does, may he drop his soap many times over. So, if or when he gets out, I and many other people will be waiting. This was about 18 months ago. I lived alone when I was 19, and one night I decided to walk down to McDonald's like I do on occasion. I lived about 1 kilometer from McDonald's. It was a bit of a sketchy area with a lot of people roaming the streets and a lot of drug addicts and criminals. I started walking and saw two guys, probably around my age, on the other side of the street. In this situation, it's important to note that my house and McDonald's were on the same main street, opposite tree-dense campsites on the beach. I could feel their eyes as I walked past, but I didn't look up. They crossed the road and started walking behind me. They were close enough for me to hear them laughing and whistling. They waited at the corner as I went into McDonald's, and I could see them watching. I left through the back door and walked straight up the side street for around 3 blocks before I braved going back to the main road. I came out in front of them, and again they started following me. They were steadily gaining on me. I walked as fast as I could without running, because I knew then they would catch up to me. I came to a corner with a 7-Eleven and turned in. As soon as I was out of their sight, I ran straight behind the store and hid behind a dumpster in a bush. I stayed there for maybe 25 minutes. I slowly emerged and went up to the next side street. I followed that street until I came down 2 more shops behind Main Street. They were standing under a post light directly in my way. I froze and walked backwards so slowly and carefully, trying to not be seen or heard. Again, I ran around another side street and ended up looping around my house and jumping my back fence. After that, plus a couple other similar experiences, I have serious anxiety about leaving the house by myself. This happened about 15 years ago when I was 12 and my youngest brother was around 2. I was with my mom, my baby brother, my older brother who was about 10 at the time, and a friend's one weekend at the mall. It might have been around Halloween because I remember my baby brother was wearing some kind of cowboy thing with a hat. I should say that my brother was a really cute baby, so it wasn't unusual for random people to comment on it while we were out. We were in Burger King waiting in line when this guy walks in behind us and almost immediately starts going on about how cute my brother is. My mom looked and said she also saw a woman with a baby standing near him, so she kind of just figured this guy was a dad, and so she didn't think it was unusual. We eat and forget about it and go ahead shopping. We were in a CD store when we noticed the guy again, but this time he was with another man around the same age. They were both, it seemed, in their 40s or 50s. One was a little taller, but they were both chubby. The shorter guy wore glasses. There wasn't really anything distinct about them that would put them apart from anybody else, and I think that is the scariest part for me. They were talking to each other when they walked in behind us, and while we were shopping, one of them stayed at the front of the store, while the other one circled around us in the aisles towards the back. My mom says now that this was when she realized something was up, but she didn't want to say anything because she didn't want us to freak out. So when we left the store, my mom took us towards the opposite end of the mall, keeping an eye out to see if the guys were still following us. And they were. We went into 2 or 3 more stores and they were in each one, not even shopping for anything, just looking at my brother like freaks. At this point, my mom pulled me aside and told me what was going on. I'd also noticed them, but I was 12 and I wasn't really thinking it was anything weird until my mom confirmed that something really sketchy was happening. We decided that we're going to leave, since the parking lot was right outside and our car was close. And sure enough, the 2 guys started following us. My mom stopped, pretending to look in her purse for her keys, and they walked by us for a couple of minutes. Then one of them quote-unquote dropped something on the floor and stalled by pretending to look around for it. My mom looked at me and said, "Go find the police." This mall is in an urban area right outside of the Bronx, and it's fairly small, so it wasn't hard for me to find a couple of officers and tell them what was going on. I walked them back to where my family was, and I guess the 2 guys saw them because they jetted for the parking lot. The cops followed them and my mom hauled ass back home. As far as I know, they got the plate number of the car the guys were in, and it turned out to be registered to some 90-year-old woman in Florida. That's all that really came of it though. I don't know how scary this sounds to people who haven't experienced something like it, but I know that it freaked me out that even a few years later I had nightmares about it. That the guys followed us home and murdered my family. My mom has said that was one of the scariest things that's ever happened to her. This happened shortly before weed was legalized in Germany. In Berlin, regulation was already quite loose. As long as you didn't explicitly bother anyone, you usually wouldn't get arrested for smoking it in public. I've been smoking daily for years. I know it's not great, but that's beside the point. So I can function pretty well while stoned. However, I almost never smoke in public, partly to avoid trouble, but mostly because I enjoy the comfort of my own home. One late night around 3 a.m., I was chilling online with friends, ready to call it a day. I wanted to relax with a joint and one of my favorite shows, but unfortunately, I had no snacks left. Determined to end the night with a proper munchie session, I decided to hit a nearby store. A small convenience store similar to a 7-Eleven. At that hour, only the sketchiest ones are still open, often operating illegally. I grabbed my coat and keys but stopped short before leaving. Why not add a little joy to this cold walk? I thought, rolling a small joint. I lit it as I stepped outside, braving the freezing breeze. The area I live in is pretty rough. Mostly foreign residents, many from Arabic countries too. Poor integration has led to crime and violence being all too common. Even so, I was in good spirits as I strolled toward the flickering neon sign of the store. Just one more intersection to go. A group of men stood at the corner. They looked Middle Eastern to me, a bit older than me, and watched me as I walked by. It felt normal, nothing to worry about, I thought. Already a little bit high. I crossed the street without giving them much thought. Then, I heard a voice call out, "Routine ID check. Please show me your identification." My heart sank. Of course, this has to happen the one time I smoke in public, I thought, turning to face the police. Only they weren't the police. It was the group from the intersection, now slowly approaching me. "Routine ID check. Please show me your ID. We are undercover cops," one of them said with a smug smile. I froze. The fact that they weren't cops became clear when, despite their demand, none of them reached for any identification. "You know smoking weed is illegal, don't you?" the man continued. His pupils were enormous, like saucers even. It was obvious these guys had no authority whatsoever. They began circling me. "Show us what's in your pockets," the leader demanded. So it's a robbery, I thought. As long as I don't resist, maybe I'll only lose my phone and the few bills I brought for snacks. Then a wave of dread hit me. My weekly tips, about $300 in cash, were also in my pocket. I had forgotten to deposit it earlier. Losing that money would crush my tight budget for the month. What now? As I slowly reached into my pocket, the leader pressed me. "What's taking so long?" I pulled out an old pack of gum and some broken headphones, hoping to satisfy them. "Where's your wallet? I need your ID," he insisted. Still fumbling, too stubborn and stupid to hand over my tips, I inadvertently revealed something that shocked even me. The glint of a Glock tucked into his belt. Knives and metal rods are typical weapons here, but a gun, that was insane, even by local standards. German gun laws are incredibly strict. My adrenaline spiked. Slowly, I pulled out the $5 bill I planned on to use for snacks, trying to keep my expression neutral. "You've got no wallet?" he growled, his face darkening. My brain screamed at me to do something, anything, before this escalated further. Then a desperate thought flashed through my mind. Sometimes, and for some reason, the Arabs in this area had a well-known fear of the Russians, with frequent clashes between the two groups. Maybe, just maybe, I could use this. In a heavy Russian accent, I stammered, "My friends have my wallet. They're coming soon. We meet here." To my surprise, their poor English comprehension worked in my favor. They exchanged glances, muttering in German, and decided to wait. I forced myself to look confused, maintaining the bluff. It worked. Their effort to translate or figure me out must have seemed too much trouble. The leader finally pointed at my $5 bill. "All right then, you get us something to drink." Reluctantly, I followed them into the store. They grabbed a 6-pack of Coke and I paid, heart pounding. I was certain this wasn't over, that they'd either search me themselves or retaliate when my non-existent friends didn't show up. But then just like that, they left. No violence or further questions. Nothing. I stood there in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Looking back, I can't believe I bluffed in such a dangerous situation. It could have been my last day on Earth, all over $300. I've learned my lesson. These days, I avoid walking around late at night when the streets are empty. And to those guys from that night, let's not meet again ever. I am a 22-year-old female. At the time of this incident, I was about 16 or 17 years old. Because of what happened, I now never walk anywhere by myself after dark. I had decided to sneak out to meet up with a friend, but neither of us had a car, so we were going to walk and meet up halfway between our houses. The halfway point was about a 40-minute walk. We ended up meeting up at around midnight, and the walk there went fine, no issues. We hung out for a while and ended up losing track of time. It was now about 3 a.m. I had to get home before my parents woke up for work or risk getting caught. We said our goodbyes and I started on my long walk back home. Since it was 3 in the morning, it was basically a ghost town. Not a person in sight. I hadn't seen even a single car drive past, so I figured I would have a nice walk home. I was wrong. About 10 minutes into my walk, I hear a car coming up behind me. Nothing too alarming about that. As the car passed me, they slammed on their brakes, then cut off all of their lights. Immediate red flag. I saw the car turn down the next street ahead. I knew I would have to pass them to get home. Instead, I ran into a nearby parking lot and hid in the bushes and pulled out my phone to call my sister to at the very least let somebody know where I was at and what was happening and call 911 if needed. I unlocked my phone and of course, 1%. Then my phone died. As soon as this happened, I started to panic. I waited there for what seemed like forever and decided to start towards home again. I started walking again and past the street they turned on and didn't see any cars. I started to relax until I walked a little bit further and saw the very same car parked in the Burger King parking lot. As soon as they saw me, they started to back out of the parking lot and headed towards me. I bolted across to the other side of the street. Instead of staying on the same road, I ducked into a neighborhood that would let me go back onto the main road, but closer to my house. I got back onto the main road and thought I was in the clear. Then sure enough, the creep was driving towards me, and as soon as he passed me, he made a U-turn so that way he could follow me again, driving slow enough to be directly behind me. Luckily, another car was coming up behind him, so he was forced to speed up. I saw him up ahead going to turn around again. I took this opportunity to lay down in the grass between someone's fence and the sidewalk just out of sight, so any passing cars could not see me. After he passed again, I got up and started sprinting towards a neighborhood that would lead out to another main road that my house is off of. I made it to the main road and was so close to my house, but again, I see the freaking car. He passed me and started turning around. I ran across the street and through this field and hopped my neighbor's fence. Cut across my yard, ran inside. I'd never been so happy to be home. This guy followed me for my entire walk home. I'm not sure what would have happened if I had just kept walking and ignored all the warning signs, but I know his intentions were not good. It was by far the scariest thing to ever happen to me.